The stars looked different from this far out. Captain Samuel Wright knew this view well after 20 years in space, but it still made him feel small. He stood tall on the bridge of the ESS Defiant, running his hand through his gray hair. The ship hummed quietly around him. "Beautiful, isn't it?" asked Commander Olivia Martinez, walking up beside him. She pointed to a distant blue dot. "You can barely see Earth from here." Wright nodded. "Hard to believe that tiny dot sent us all the way out here. The Defiant wasn't just any ship. It was Earth's only true warship that could travel this deep into space. The rest of the planned fleet was still being built back home." Wright felt the weight of this fact every day. If anything happened to the Defiant, Earth would have no protection. "Captain, you should get some rest," Martinez suggested. "We've been at the edge of the solar system for 3 weeks with nothing to report." Wright shook his head. "Something doesn't feel right. Call it a hunch from an old space dog." As if answering his worry, the alarm suddenly blared through the ship. Red lights flashed across the bridge. "Contact!" shouted Lieutenant Grace Miller from her station. She looked up with wide eyes. "Multiple ships coming from beyond the Kuiper Belt, sir." Wright rushed to her station. "How many?" Miller's fingers moved quickly across the glowing screen. Her face went pale. 73 vessels, sir. And they're big." The bridge fell silent. Earth had never encountered alien life before, let alone an armada. "Are they responding to our greeting signals?" Wright asked, keeping his voice calm despite the fear growing in his chest. Communications Officer Kevin Powell adjusted his headset. "Nothing yet, sir. Wait. Incoming transmission now." The speakers crackled to life. The sound that came through wasn't like any language Wright had ever heard. It was harsh, with strange clicks and growls. It made the hair on his arms stand up. "What are they saying?" Wright asked. Powell shook his head. "I don't know, sir, but the computer is trying to translate." The ship's AI spoke in its flat voice. "Message translation. Inferior beings. Surrender your vessel and prepare for inspection. Resistance will result in destruction." Wright looked around at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They had trained for first contact, but not like this. "Show me these ships," Wright ordered. The main screen lit up with images of the approaching vessels. They were unlike anything Wright had seen before. Dark, twisted shapes with strange glowing parts. They looked like they were made from some kind of black metal that seemed to drink in the light around them. "They're forming a half circle," Martinez pointed out, "cutting off our path back to Earth." Lieutenant Eric Foster spoke up from the weapons station. "Sir, their energy readings are off the charts. Each one of those ships has enough firepower to take out a small moon." Wright's mind raced. The Defiant was advanced, but it was just one ship against 73. He knew what conventional wisdom would say: retreat and warn Earth. But these ships were faster. They would follow and find Earth defenseless. "Send a message to Earth Command," Wright ordered. "Tell them we've made first contact and it's hostile. Include all scan data on their ships." Powell nodded grimly. "Yes, sir, but at this distance it will take 40 minutes for the message to reach Earth. By then this will be over, one way or another," Wright said quietly. Martinez moved closer to him. "Sam, what are you thinking? We can't fight them all." Wright looked at her, his old friend of 15 years. "I'm thinking about the 12 billion people back home who have no idea what's coming their way." He turned to address the whole bridge. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are Earth's only line of defense right now. If these aliens get past us, our home is in danger." The alien message played again, louder this time. The crew looked to their captain. "Sir," Miller called out, "they're charging weapons." Wright made his decision. "Get me Dr. Alan Clark. Now." Within minutes, a thin man with messy brown hair rushed onto the bridge. He carried a small silver case that he clutched tightly to his chest. "Dr. Clark," Wright greeted him, "I believe it's time to test your theory." Clark's eyes widened. "Captain, Project Ouroboros isn't ready. It's never been field tested. The quantum entanglement drive could tear this ship apart." The ship shook as something hit their outer shields. "Warning shot," Foster reported. "Shields holding at 92%. Wright turned back to Clark. Doctor, either we test your theory today, or we die trying. There's no other option. Clark looked around at the approaching alien fleet on the screen, then back at the captain. He swallowed hard and nodded. I'll need 10 minutes to bring the system online. You have 5, Wright said firmly. The doctor rushed off the bridge toward the engine room. Wright returned to his command chair. All hands, battle stations, he ordered through the ship-wide comm. This is not a drill. Prepare for possible ship-wide system changes. The alien ships moved closer, now forming a complete circle around the Defiant. They were trapped. They're hailing us again, Powell reported. Put it through, Wright said. This time the alien message came through in broken English. Human vessel. Your technology primitive. Your resistance pointless. Submit now or be destroyed. Wright stood from his chair, looking at the massive fleet surrounding his lone ship. He straightened his uniform and cleared his throat. This is Captain Samuel Wright of the Earth spaceship Defiant. We do not surrender. He nodded to Powell to cut the transmission. Martinez gave him a small smile. That'll give them something to think about. Sir, Miller called out. All enemy. Ships are charging weapons. Shields at maximum, Wright ordered. And get me a status update on Dr. Clark's progress. The ship's computer responded. Dr. Clark reports Ouroboros protocol at 60% initialization. Wright gripped the arms of his chair as the alien fleet prepared to attack. Hold position, everyone. Help is coming. The first volley of alien weapons fire lit up space around them like a deadly light show. Brace for impact, Wright shouted. The Defiant shuddered as energy blasts hammered its shields. This was it. Humanity's first battle against an alien force, and they were hopelessly outnumbered. But Captain Samuel Wright had one card left to play, a theoretical technology that might just save them all, if only they could survive long enough to use it. 6 hours before the alien fleet appeared, Dr. Alan Clark sat alone in his lab deep inside the Defiant. The clock on the wall read 0300 hours, but he hadn't slept. Dark circles hung under his eyes as he stared at the screen. Run simulation 147, he told the computer, taking a sip of his cold coffee. The lab hummed as powerful computers worked. On the main screen, a model of the Defiant glowed blue. Then the simulation started. The ship began to blur, splitting into multiple ghostly copies of itself. Power levels stable, the computer reported. Temporal echo formation proceeding. Clark leaned forward, hope rising in his chest. Maybe this time. Then red warning lights flashed across the screen. Error, system overload, simulation failed. No. Clark slammed his fist on the desk, sending his coffee mug crashing to the floor. What went wrong this time? The door to the lab slid open, and Dr. Natalie Rivera walked in, holding 2 fresh cups of coffee. She had been Clark's assistant for 3 years and knew his late-night habits well. Still having trouble with the power requirements? She asked, handing him a cup. Clark took it gratefully. This is the 5th failure tonight. The math works perfectly, Natalie. I've checked it 100 times. But the energy needed to create even one temporal echo would drain our main reactor in seconds. Rivera sat next to him, looking at the failed simulation data. You're trying to bend the laws of physics. Alan, that never comes cheap. The Ouroboros system has to work, Clark said, rubbing his tired eyes. If we can create temporal copies of the ship, even for just a fraction of a second, we could change space warfare forever. Rivera scrolled through his equations on her tablet. Have you considered using the emergency backup reactors too? If we linked all power sources together? Clark shook his head. Even then, we'd get maybe 30 seconds of operation before everything fails. And there's another problem. He pulled up a different screen showing the ship's structure. The stress on the hull would be massive. We might tear ourselves apart. But if it worked, Rivera said softly, one ship could fight like a whole fleet. Clark was about to respond when the ship's alarm suddenly blared. A red light flashed overhead. All senior staff report to stations. This is not a drill. Repeat. All senior staff report to stations. came Captain Wright's voice over the comm system. Clark and Rivera looked at each other in surprise. They were at the edge of the solar system on a routine patrol. Nothing ever happened out here. "I need to go," Clark said, gathering his notes. "Keep working on the power distribution problem." 5 minutes later, he was rushing through the corridors of the Defiant, pushing past crew members heading to their battle stations. The ship's halls were filled with controlled chaos. "What's happening?" Clark asked a passing security officer. "Alien contact," the officer replied without stopping. "A lot of them." Clark's stomach dropped. He'd been developing the Ouroboros system for scientific exploration, not actual combat. It wasn't ready for a real battle. When he finally reached the bridge, Clark's worst fears were confirmed. The main screen showed dozens of alien vessels surrounding the Defiant. Their strange, dark shapes looked nothing like human ships. "Dr. Clark, good timing," Captain Wright said, his face grim. "I need your expertise." Clark joined Wright at the tactical display. Commander Martinez and Lieutenant Foster were already there, studying the alien fleet's formation. 73 ships, Wright explained, all heavily armed. They've demanded our surrender." Clark stared at the display in shock. "And if we refuse?" "They didn't leave much room for interpretation," Wright replied. "It's surrender or die." Foster pointed to the alien ships. "Their weapons are charging. We need options, Captain." All eyes turned to Clark. He swallowed hard, knowing what they were thinking. "You want to use the Ouroboros system?" he said quietly. Wright nodded. "Is it possible?" Clark ran his hands through his messy hair. "Captain, I've been working on this technology for 8 years. It's still experimental. We've never even tested it outside simulations." "I understand the risks," Wright said. "But I need to know how it works and if it can help us." Clark took a deep breath and pulled up his research files on the tactical display. A 3D model of the Defiant appeared, surrounded by ghostly copies of itself. "The Ouroboros system creates what I call temporal echoes," Clark explained. "It uses quantum entanglement to make our ship exist at multiple points in time simultaneously, just fractions of a second apart." Martinez frowned. "Like copies of our ship?" "Not exactly," Clark said. "It's still just one ship, but it exists at several moments in time at once, all overlapping in the same space." Foster looked confused. "I don't understand how that helps us fight." Clark zoomed in on the weapons systems in his model. "Because each temporal echo can fire weapons independently. If we create 1,000 echoes, we fire 1,000 times at once. One ship becomes, effectively, 1,000 ships." The bridge went silent as everyone processed this information. "So we become our own fleet," Wright said finally. "In theory, yes," Clark nodded. "But there are serious problems. The power requirements are enormous, and the stress on the ship's structure would be extreme." Chief Engineer Sofia Rodriguez joined the conversation. "How much power are we talking about?" Clark showed them the energy calculations. "More than our main reactor can produce." Rodriguez studied the numbers carefully. "If we shut down all non-essential systems and reroute power from life support, gravity control, and the backup reactors, we might get enough. But it would leave us vulnerable afterward." "How long could we maintain the effect?" Wright asked. Rodriguez ran quick calculations on her pad. "Maybe 30 seconds before critical systems start to fail." Wright considered this. 30 seconds to take down as many of their ships as possible. "Captain," Clark warned, "even if we get the power issue solved, there's no guarantee the ship can handle the stress. The hull wasn't designed for this kind of temporal distortion." The ship shook as something hit their shields. "First volley from the alien fleet," Foster reported. "Shields at 85% and dropping." Captain Wright straightened up. Decision made. "We have no choice." "Dr. Clark, how quickly can you bring the Ouroboros system online?" Clark felt the weight of the entire crew's lives on his shoulders. His untested theory was about to be their only hope of survival. With full crew support, maybe 5 minutes to reconfigure the power systems and initiate the drive. Wright nodded. "You have 4 minutes. Rodriguez, help the doctor with whatever he needs." As Clark and Rodriguez rushed from the bridge, Wright called out, And Doctor, make it work. All our lives depend on it now. The bridge of the Defiant shook violently as another blast from the alien fleet hit the shields. Warning lights flashed everywhere, and the sound of alarms filled the air. Shields down to 55%, Lieutenant Grace Miller called out, her fingers moving quickly over her controls. Captain Wright gripped the arms of his command chair to stay upright. Return fire. Target the lead ship, he ordered. Lieutenant Foster activated the main weapons. Bright blue beams shot out from the Defiant, striking the largest alien vessel. The enemy ship's shields glowed purple where the beams hit but didn't break. No effect, sir, Foster reported. Their shields are too strong. Wright clenched his jaw. Keep firing. We need to buy Dr. Clark more time. In the engine room, Dr. Clark and Chief Engineer Rodriguez worked frantically. Engineers and technicians ran back and forth, following their orders. The noise was deafening as they rerouted power cables and modified the ship's systems. Disconnect life support from decks 5 through 10, Rodriguez ordered a team of engineers. We need that power. But the crew quarters are on those decks. One engineer protested. Everyone's at battle stations anyway, Rodriguez snapped. And if this doesn't work, we'll all be dead in 10 minutes. Clark worked at the main console, entering complex equations into the Ouroboros drive's control system. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. This was the moment his life's work would either save them all or fail completely. Power levels. At 72% of what we need, he told Rodriguez. It's not enough. Rodriguez wiped sweat from her forehead. What about the emergency reserves, the ones meant for the escape pods? Clark hesitated. If we use those and this doesn't work, then we won't have the power to escape, Rodriguez finished his thought. I know, but we're running out of options. After a moment, Clark nodded. Do it. Reroute the emergency reserves too. Back on the bridge, the situation was getting worse. Another blast rocked the ship stronger than before. Shields at 40%, Miller shouted over the noise. They're targeting our engines now. Wright hit the comm button on his chair. Engine room, status report. Clark's voice came through, broken by static. Almost ready, Captain. 2 more minutes. We may not have 2 minutes, Wright replied grimly. He turned to Communications Officer Powell. Any response from Earth? Powell shook his head. Nothing yet, sir. The message is still traveling. Commander Martinez studied the tactical display. Their formation is changing. They're surrounding us completely now. Wright stood up and walked to the weapons station. Foster, if we concentrate all our firepower on one ship, can we break through their shields? Foster ran the calculations. Maybe, sir, but it would drain our weapons systems and there are still 72 other ships to deal with. I just need to create a hole in their formation, Wright explained. Give us somewhere to run if Clark's plan doesn't work. Martinez agreed. It's worth a try. Wright pointed to a smaller ship on the edge of the alien formation. Target that vessel. Full power to forward beam weapons. Foster adjusted the targeting systems. Ready, sir? Fire, Wright ordered. The Defiant's main beam weapon glowed brightly, then released a powerful blast that cut through space toward the chosen alien ship. The beam hit the smaller ship's shields, which flickered and strained under the attack. Keep firing, Wright commanded. Don't let up. The beam continued for 10 seconds, 15, 20. Finally, the alien ship's shields collapsed, and the beam cut into its hull. A series of explosions rippled across the alien vessel. Direct hit, Foster shouted. Their shields are down. A small cheer went up from the bridge crew, but it died quickly as they saw what happened next. 5 other alien ships moved to fill the gap, protecting their damaged comrade. They're adapting to our tactics, Martinez said quietly. The ship shook again as the aliens launched a coordinated attack. Shields at 25%, Miller reported. One more hit like that and they'll fail completely. Wright hit the comm again. Engine room, we're out of time. In the engine room, Clark and Rodriguez were making the final connections to the Ouroboros drive. The modified system glowed with an eerie blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Power levels at 98%, Rodriguez reported. It's not perfect, but it should be enough for about 25 seconds of operation. Clark rechecked his calculations one last time. The temporal field will form around the entire ship, Everyone on board will experience a strange sensation, like déjà vu but more intense. Will it hurt them? Rodriguez asked. I don't know, Clark admitted. This has never been tested on humans before. The ship shook harder than ever. The lights in the engine room flickered. Final shield failure in 30 seconds, came Miller's voice over the comm. Clark looked at Rodriguez. She nodded. Do it. With a deep breath, Clark activated the Ouroboros system. The blue glow from the drive intensified, spreading through the power conduits that ran throughout the ship. Ouroboros system is online, Clark reported to the bridge. Captain, you need to give the command to activate the temporal field. On the bridge, Wright looked at his tactical display. The alien ships were closing in for the kill. This was their last chance. All hands, brace for temporal displacement. Wright ordered over the ship-wide comm. Dr. Clark, activate the field. In the engine room, Clark pressed the final sequence into his console. The Ouroboros drive hummed louder, vibrating the deck plates beneath their feet. Temporal field generating, Clark reported, his voice tight. Field stability at 85%, 90%, holding at 92%. Throughout the Defiant, crew members felt a strange sensation wash over them. It was as if they were experiencing the same moment multiple times, with slight variations each time. Some reported seeing ghostly images of themselves standing nearby. Communications Officer Powell turned to Wright, his eyes wide. Captain, I've been analyzing the alien fleet's communications. They're using a quantum frequency very similar to our Ouroboros field. Clark's voice came through the comm. What did he say? Their communications use quantum technology? Confirmed, Powell replied. Their ships seemed to be linked in some kind of quantum network. Clark's excitement was clear even through the static. Captain, this changes everything. If they're using quantum communications, their network will be extremely vulnerable to interference from our temporal field. How can we exploit that? Wright asked. Modify the temporal echoes to pulse at the same frequency as their network, Clark suggested. It might create a feedback loop in their systems. Wright looked to Foster. Can you do that? Foster nodded, already adjusting the weapon systems. Reconfiguring now. Outside the ship, the aliens seemed confused by what was happening. Their formation became less organized as the Defiant began to blur, seeming to exist in multiple places at once. Ouroboros field at full strength, Clark reported. We have 23 seconds before power failure. Captain Wright stood tall, facing the view screen showing the alien fleet. All weapons, fire at will. Target as many ships as possible. It was time to see if one ship could really take down a fleet. Space around the Defiant began to change. The stars seemed to blur and stretch. The ship itself appeared to shimmer, like heat rising from hot pavement. To the alien fleet, it looked as if the lone Earth vessel was becoming fuzzy and unclear. Inside, the Defiant, the crew felt strange sensations. Captain Wright felt like he was giving the same order over and over, each time slightly different. Lieutenant Foster saw his own hands moving across his control panel multiple times at once. It was disorienting but not painful. Ouroboros field is stable, Dr. Clark's voice reported from the engine room. Temporal multiplication reaching factor 500, 700, 900. Commander Martinez gripped the edge of a console to steady herself. What's happening to us? We're experiencing time differently, Wright explained, his voice sounding odd even to himself, as if he was speaking in layers. Our ship now exists at many points in time simultaneously. On the main screen, they could see the confused reactions of the alien fleet. The enemy ships were adjusting their positions, unsure what to make of the strange readings they were getting. From the Defiant, weapons ready, sir, Foster reported. All systems linked to temporal field. Wright nodded, seeing ghostly afterimages of his own movements. Fire everything we have. Target as many ships as possible. Foster pressed the firing controls. What happened next was beyond anything they had imagined. The Defiant's weapons, energy beams, missiles, and defensive countermeasures, all fired at once. But instead of a single volley, it was as if 1,000 ships had fired simultaneously. Each temporal echo of the Defiant launched its own attack, all within the span of a second. Space between the Defiant and the alien fleet exploded with light. Thousands of energy beams cut through the darkness. Hundreds of missiles streaked toward the enemy ships. It was like watching a lightning storm in space. The alien fleet had no defense against this impossible attack. Their shields, designed to handle conventional weapons, couldn't cope with the sheer number of strikes happening at exactly the same moment. "It's working," Martinez exclaimed, watching the tactical display. "Their shields are failing." The first wave of alien ships began to break apart. Explosions rippled across their hulls as the combined firepower of 1,000 temporal echoes tore through their defenses. 5 ships, then 10, then 15 were destroyed or critically damaged in the initial assault. But the Defiant was straining under the effort. The hull groaned and shuddered. Warning lights flashed across every console on the bridge. "Hull integrity at 72% and falling," Miller reported. "The temporal stress is affecting our structure." From engineering, Rodriguez's voice came through. "Power levels critical. The main reactor is overheating. We have maybe 15 seconds before system failure." The alien fleet was recovering from their initial shock. The remaining ships began to adjust their shields and weapons, adapting to the strange attack. "They're learning," Foster warned. "The next wave won't be as effective." Wright made a quick decision. "Dr. Clark, can we modify the Ouroboros field to directly attack their quantum communication network?" There was a pause before Clark answered. "Yes, but it would require inverting the field's polarity. We'd use all our remaining power at once." "What would happen to us?" Wright asked. "I don't know," Clark admitted. "The field would collapse immediately. We might survive, or the temporal backlash could tear us apart." Another barrage of alien weapons fire hit the Defiant, this time breaking through in several places. Small explosions erupted on the lower decks. "Shields failing," Miller shouted. "Hull breaches on decks 3 and 7, emergency bulkheads closing." Wright looked around at his crew. Despite the danger, they showed no fear, only determination. They had already destroyed nearly 20 alien ships, but more than 50 remained. Without another miracle, they wouldn't survive. "Do it, Dr. Clark," Wright ordered. "Invert the field." "Aye, Captain," Clark responded. "Inverting Ouroboros field in 3, 2, 1. The humming of the Ouroboros drive changed pitch, rising to a high-pitched whine that made everyone's teeth hurt. The blue glow that had spread throughout the ship turned bright white, almost blinding. "Field inversion complete," Clark shouted over the noise. "Releasing temporal wave. Now." The Defiant seemed to snap back into normal space with a violent jolt that threw several crew members to the floor. The white glow gathered itself into a visible wave of distorted space that shot outward in all directions. When the wave reached the alien fleet, something extraordinary happened. Each enemy ship began to experience its own temporal displacement, but unlike the controlled effect on the Defiant, theirs was chaotic and destructive. The crew watched in amazement as alien vessels began to overlap with themselves in space and time. It was as if each ship was trying to exist in multiple places at once, but failing catastrophically. Matter occupied the same space at different points in time, resulting in a devastating effect. Alien ships began to tear themselves apart from the inside. Some simply vanished, while others exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The quantum communication network that linked them had become their downfall, spreading the temporal disruption from ship to ship like a virus. "What's happening to them?" Martinez asked, staring at the screen. Clark's voice came weakly through the comm. "Their quantum network. It's amplifying the effect. Each ship is experiencing uncontrolled temporal feedback, molecular destabilization on a massive scale." Foster's console showed the incredible readings. 30 ships destroyed, 40, 50. It's spreading through their entire fleet. The wave continued outward, catching the farthest alien ships as they tried to retreat. Within minutes, where there had been a mighty fleet of 73 warships, there was now only debris, floating in space. The bridge of the Defiant fell silent as the crew realized what they had accomplished. One ship had indeed taken down an entire fleet, but their victory had come at a cost. The Defiant was badly damaged. Most systems were offline, and the Ouroboros drive had burned itself out completely. Wright slumped in his command chair, exhausted, but relieved. "Damage report," he managed to say. Miller checked her partially functioning console. Life support operating on backup power, engines offline, weapons offline, communications at minimal capacity. "Casualties?" Wright asked, dreading the answer. Martinez consulted her pad. "Minor injuries reported throughout the ship, no fatalities." She paused, checking another report. "Dr. Clark is unconscious but stable. The feedback from the Ouroboros drive overload knocked him out." Wright nodded, relief washing over him. They had survived. Not just survived, but won an impossible battle. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered Powell. Tell them the threat has been neutralized. One ship was enough." As emergency lights cast a soft red glow across the bridge, the crew of the Defiant allowed themselves small smiles. They had faced an overwhelming enemy and emerged victorious, thanks to human ingenuity, courage, and one desperate gamble with the laws of physics itself. 2 weeks after the battle, the Defiant limped toward Earth. The ship moved slowly on its backup engines. Many parts of the hull were patched with temporary repairs. Inside, the crew worked around the clock to keep essential systems running. On the bridge, Captain Wright sat in his command chair, reviewing damage reports. The victory had come at a high cost. The main engines were destroyed. The weapon systems were offline, and the Ouroboros drive was completely burned out. "How much longer until we reach Earth?" Wright asked. Lieutenant Miller checked her navigation screen. "At our current speed, 3 more days, sir." Commander Martinez entered the bridge carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Wright. "You should get some rest, Sam. You've been on duty for 18 hours straight." Wright took a sip of the hot coffee. "I'll rest when we're home." The communications console beeped. Powell turned to Wright with a smile. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. They're sending ships to escort us home." A cheer went up from the tired bridge crew. Earth had received their message and was sending help. Wright activated the main screen. Soon they could see 5 ships approaching, the newest vessels in Earth's growing fleet, coming to welcome their battle-scarred sister ship. "They're hailing us, sir," Powell reported. The screen changed to show Fleet Admiral Laura Bennett. Her face showed relief and pride. "Captain Wright, on behalf of Earth Command and all humanity, welcome home," she said. "We received your message and the data from the battle. What you and your crew accomplished is nothing short of miraculous." Wright smiled tiredly. "Thank you, Admiral. The crew performed beyond all expectations." "The President wants to speak with you as soon as you land," Bennett continued. "The whole world is calling your crew heroes." After the call ended, Wright turned to Martinez. "Heroes," he repeated quietly. "We were just trying to survive." "We did more than survive," Martinez reminded him. "We showed that humanity can defend itself, even against impossible odds." 3 days later, the Defiant entered Earth orbit to a hero's welcome. Smaller ships flew alongside, escorting the damaged vessel to the space dock. From the planet below, billions watched on screens as the ship that saved them came home. In the medical bay, Dr. Clark had finally regained consciousness. He sat up in bed as Dr. Rivera gave him the news. "Your Ouroboros system worked," she told him excitedly. "1 ship against 73 and we won." Clark smiled weakly. "Any chance it survived the battle? I'd like to study the results." Rivera shook her head. "The drive burned out completely. But don't worry. Earth Command already approved funding to build an improved version." A week after landing, Captain Wright stood in Admiral Bennett's office. Through the window, he could see the shipyards where dozens of new vessels were under construction. Workers moved with new purpose and urgency. "The alien transmission has been fully translated," Bennett told him. "They called themselves the Corvan Dominion. They've conquered 3 other species in their region of space. They'll be back," Wright said. It wasn't a question. Bennett nodded. "Yes, but we'll be ready. Every ship in the new fleet will be equipped with an improved Ouroboros system. Dr. Clark is already working with a team of scientists to solve the power problem." Wright watched the workers in the shipyard. "How long until the fleet is ready?" 6 months for the first 20 ships. A year for the full fleet of 100. Wright thought about the battle, about how close they had come to defeat. One ship had saved humanity this time, but they couldn't count on such miracles again. "We need to be faster," he said. "The Corvins will return with a bigger fleet, and they'll be prepared for our technology." Bennett put a hand on his shoulder. "That's why I'm promoting you to Admiral. You're going to lead the fleet when it's ready." Wright looked at her in surprise, then nodded with determination. Earth had survived its first contact with a hostile alien civilization. Next time, they would be the ones with the overwhelming force. As he left the office, Wright looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Corvins were planning their revenge, but humanity would be waiting, no longer defenseless. Against all odds, one ship had bought Earth the time it needed, and when the enemy returned, they would face not one ship, but 100, each armed with the technology that had defeated them before. The next battle would be very different indeed.